to stay in power. The economy is small and weak. Gambia's biggest export is peanuts, though the country also has become a significant source of migrants making their way to Europe.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and with our main topic, which is the 28th African Union Summit held in Ethiopia and kicks off today, attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. And on this issue, we're glad to be joined by Ambassador Ahmed Haggag, former Secretary General of the African Society. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Sir, of course, the African Union Summit is discussing different important topics, among which is fighting corruption, and an agreement will be signed regarding fighting corruption in Africa, fighting terrorism. Several issues will be discussed, including empowerment of women and gender equality, and of course cooperation between different African countries. How do you see the significance of this conference and the attendance of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi?
I think President Sisi, since his assumption of the presidency of Egypt, is giving a lot of attention to the African summits, and he visits many African countries and receives African heads of state in Cairo. And there are major issues which will be discussed, especially the request of Morocco to return to the African Union after its withdrawal 33 years ago from the Organization of African Unity as a protest of the admission of the Sahrawi Republic in the ranks of the African Union. There are many countries in the summit which advocate and support Morocco's admission. But there are a minority of countries which insist that this admission should be coupled with recognition of Morocco of the presence of the Sahrawi Republic as an integral member of the African Union. It will be discussed in a closed meeting, and there are many rumors about the compromise which will be held. One of them is Morocco will be admitted, and it will work after its admission for the expulsion of the Sahrawi Republic.
And Morocco left in 1984.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And moving on to the main theme of the summit, which is harnessing the demographic dividend through investment in youth. How do you see the significance of investment in youth in the African continent, and especially that the African continent has more than 42% youth, and also Egypt? So how do you see this, and how see the significance of empowering the youth in Egypt and other African countries?
Africa is the youngest continent in the world, and it's endowed by a high percentage of its population of youth. So it should be a benefit instead of a burden, but at present it is a big handicap for sustainable development in many African countries, since most African countries have a very narrow economic market, which will not allow many youth to find a work in this market. So all efforts should be geared to bring opportunities for the African youth to find a job in order to assist their countries to go ahead. This will give a spark to the development of African economies, and also will not allow the unemployed to feel bitter, and this will be a source of extremist groups to attract African youth to work in its ranks and go on terrorist attacks.
Right, Mr. Ambassador, of course, as you've just mentioned, the economic status of the African countries is one of the major issues to be discussed at the conference. How do you see the importance of establishing a free trade zone between the different African countries in boosting cooperation on the economic level between these countries?
The initiative for this came in the Sharm el-Sheikh conference, which was chaired by President Sisi last year, when he called for the amalgamation of the several free trade zones among the economic groupings in Africa in one continental group of 26 countries. And since then, many meetings were held in Addis Ababa, how to harmonize the union of such groups in one continental free trade zone. This will allow a country like Egypt to increase its exports to African countries, and also will increase its imports of from Africa to the Egyptian market. And it will be in harmony with the goal of having an African economic community comprising all African countries, but many small countries are afraid that the big economic powers in Africa will affect their own internal market if they allow their products to pour in without any custom duties or administrative regulations.
Right. Sir, how do you see the significance of reviving the spirit of Pan-Africanism across the continent, and especially with regards to implementing the Agenda of 2063?
Now, I think it is more imperative than ever after the new administration in the United States and the trend of the new administration to make difficulties against the entrance of nationals from many countries to go to the American market. And we hope that this will not affect, for instance, the AGOA agreement concluded between the American administration before and many African countries, because this will affect the free passage of goods from African countries to the American markets and vice versa. There is apprehension that the Trump administration will make more restrictions on the flow of African goods and personnel, as they are doing that with other regions of the world. So this is very important in order to increase the free trade around the world, since the United States itself was the champion of free trade around the world. But President Trump withdrew America from the Pacific group, which was Asia, which will affect the free trade around the world.
Right. President Sisi is to hold a number of sideline meetings on the sidelines of the 28th African Summit. How do you see the significance of these meetings in boosting relations with African leaders, with the African countries, and strengthening relations among different countries in Africa?
He already held several meetings with his counterparts since his arrival last night. He held a meeting with the president of Congo-Brazzaville and other presidents. But the most important meeting, in my opinion, will be his meeting with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia to discuss in a frank and transparent discussion the Renaissance Dam, which is Ethiopia is building, and to clear the air. Ethiopia, in several occasions, criticized Egypt as trying to interfere in internal affairs. Egypt denied that many times, categorically, but some of the Ethiopian press are persisting in this. Perhaps this meeting will clear the way to refute such allegation once for all. And also they will discuss the progress made by the French consultancy which the three countries, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, gave to the French consultancy firm in order to ascertain the technical aspects of the dam. Is it solid enough? Is it affecting the share of Egypt water, and so on? This will happen in a few months' time, but we hope that the three countries will agree to speed up such a report by the consultancy firm.
Right, sir. The African continent is facing a lot of challenges, among which is fighting terrorism, fighting corruption, of course, education, development of education, developing of the health system, poverty, gender equality, and women empowerment. How do you see these topics will be tackled? What are your expectations for these topics during the 28th African Union Summit?
The African Union could not settle on a plan to solve all those problems in one meeting. It has, in my opinion, to concentrate on one or two issues and make sure that the resolutions they adopt will be implemented. That's why the African Union, for instance, last year declared 2016 as a year of human rights in Africa, with a special emphasis on the rights of women. So they have to see what implemented during last year. Is there any progress, or women rights are still violated? So it is by making declarations and resolution without any implementation will give a wrong signal to the African people that the African Union is not serious in adopting something implementable. And one of the other issues also which will face the African Union is the election of the new president of the Commission and the other 9 commissioners, which includes a very prominent Egyptian lady, very talented lady working in the African Development Bank.
Right. Also, an agreement is to be signed on fighting corruption in Africa. How do you see the significance of this agreement, and do you think fighting corruption in Africa is achievable?
Very difficult. It is still a big issue in Africa. I think the whole community and the African community has noticed how Egypt is resolute in fighting corruption inside Egypt. That's why Egypt is going to join this agreement, which is adopted by several African countries in Mozambique. And it is a good document. I have been working on it while I was working in the OEU. But it needs determination, political will, and also the commitment by the governments concerned to cooperate in bringing an end to this corruption, which is not only is an evil phenomena, but it is delaying the progress of African economies in the world.
Right. Ambassador Ahmed Hagag, former Secretary General of the African Society, many thanks for your insights, sir.
Thank you very much.
Dear viewers, with this we wrap up this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.